Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Kevin Daly. This is Answers for September 1st, 2020. On Answers in this edition, there will be a school update. Cindy Curtis will provide a point of information. Audra Talbot will give us a school at home report. My guest this edition of Answers is Dr. Adrienne Smaller, clinical psychologist. And as always, participants are encouraged to send in your questions. If you have a question, hit that Q&A button or do it through chat. We want to hear from you. Answers is brought to you by PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut, a nonprofit organization which for more than 30 years has served the needs of families of children that have special health care needs. Here in front of you is a partial list of PATH's many programs and services. You can find videos of this webinar and the previous webinars on the PATH YouTube channel. There are also quite a few other videos on a variety of topics that are useful to parents and families, so be sure to check them out. To get there, the PATH YouTube channel, you could go to YouTube, just do a search, PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut. That will take you there. Or you could use the easy to remember link that you see at the bottom of your screen. For more information about PATH, please go to our website, pathct.org, where if you click around long enough, you'll find a link to all the videos that are on YouTube also. While you're online, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have any questions about this webinar, please contact me directly, Kevin Daly, at kdaly@pathct.org. Here comes the fine print, folks. This webinar should not be taken as legal advice or medical advice or advice of any kind. This is a webinar about searching for answers in an era when a lot of people have more questions than answers. And of course, this webinar and any attached materials are the sole property of PATH and are not to be used for any other purpose without the express written permission of PATH. Here's the school update for September 1st. It's time. It's time, the time we've waited for. School is starting in Connecticut. Most communities start either this week or next week. Over the summer, school people across the country have been making plans to deliver instruction under 3 different models. Let's take a look at how states plan to reopen their schools. The 3 models are full in-person learning, full remote learning, and hybrid learning, which is a combination of the previous 2. More on that in a second. So let's take a look nationally at how schools are opening. 37 states, as of Friday of last week, 37 states are leaving the decision to reopen to individual school districts. Our state, Connecticut, happens to be one of those states. 4 states are under state-ordered closures, and that's states where openings are delayed. For example, in New Mexico, where the opening is usually in early to mid-August, schools can't hold in-person classes until at least September 8th. Districts can start the academic year earlier by remote-only classes, and when students return, it will be to buildings under a hybrid model. In Rhode Island, which usually opens late August to early September, the governor pushed back the start of classes until September 14th, which is 2 weeks later than originally planned. 2 states have state-ordered closures in certain regions that are in effect. For example, in Hawaii, which is one big school district, statewide school district, the schools opened on August 17th. In some areas in Hawaii, they're offering hybrid instruction, and other areas they're offering full remote, depending on how much the virus has penetrated the community. This might be one school district, it might be one state, but unlike most states, some schools are separated by hundreds and hundreds of miles. In California, schools can't open in counties that have widespread COVID-19. Schools have to provide instruction remotely unless the county's been taken off the state's coronavirus watch list by being within acceptable limits for 14 consecutive days. In 3 states, only hybrid or remote instruction is allowed. A good example is Virginia, where schools can open 2 weeks before Labor Day. The state is currently requiring strict social distancing measures, which means that many districts will have no choice but to provide hybrid or remote instruction. 4 states have state-ordered in-person instruction orders, making in-person instruction available part-time or full-time. For example, in Texas, school districts must provide daily on-campus instruction. However, school districts can temporarily limit on-campus instruction for the first 4 weeks of school, and beyond that with a waiver. In Missouri, districts are required to open by August 24th, but they can receive a waiver from the state's Department of Education to open later. Students must be in school at least 2 days a week in Missouri. Put them all together, and you've got one colorful map. I did this 2 weeks ago, and this is what the map looked like 2 weeks ago. What it reflects is that some states are taking more precautions with opening schools than before. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, Connecticut school districts over the summer, just like all the other school districts, made plans to deliver instruction in all 3 models, and parents have the option to opt out of in-person learning in favor of full remote instruction. There's been much guidance from the state on how to reopen schools, like the governor's reopening plan for the state, the State Department of Education's plan to reopen, and guidance from the Bureau of Special Education. So, how are Connecticut schools reopening? According to a recent survey of school districts by the State Department of Education, which was reported in the CT Examiner, most school districts in Connecticut will reopen on day 1 with the hybrid model, combining in-person learning with remote instruction. Most hybrid models are called for dividing the students in a school into 2 groups. Students in the same family are also put in the same group. Each group attends school in person 2 days per week, and each group has remote instruction during the remaining 3 days of the week. On the 1 day per week when schools are closed and all the students are out of the school, that's usually used for cleaning, sanitizing the school, teacher planning, and professional development. In some school districts doing hybrid, special education students and English language learners will attend school 4 days weekly. According to the Danbury News-Times, Ansonia schools, they're reopening with a model like that. Bethel too. However, Bethel elementary schools will be hybrid only until September 29th. Their middle school will be until October 5th. Then they transition to full in-person instruction, at least that's the plan. The high school will remain hybrid. Branford has a similar plan with students attending in-person classes 2 days weekly. Kindergarten students will attend school 4 days weekly. When the Bridgeport Public Schools open, classes for grades 5 through 8 will be full in-person. The high school will use the hybrid model with students attending school in person only 2 days weekly. Bridgeport students with IEPs and English language learners will attend school in person 4 days weekly. Less than a third of Connecticut schools are planning to fully reopen for full in-person learning in the fall, and this includes East Haven, where the school year will begin with full in-person instruction for all grades. In New Canaan, students are re-entering full-time in 4 phases over the course of 5 weeks. In New Fairfield, schools are reopening with full in-person instruction. Over the summer, Connecticut school districts asked parents to indicate if they preferred to opt out of in-person instruction in favor of full remote instruction. So how many Connecticut students did opt out for full remote instruction? Well, the results are in. About 1 in 4, 25% of the students in Connecticut have entirely opted out of in-person instruction in favor of full remote instruction. In Connecticut's larger cities, like Bridgeport and New Haven, the number of students opting out for remote instruction is significant, ranging from 25% to 50%. And that's with the exception of Hartford. And when it comes to education, it seems Hartford is always exceptional. 2 weeks ago, Hartford's superintendent of schools reported that 58% of all students are choosing full remote instruction. And that's with 42% opting for in-person instruction. In smaller cities and suburban towns like Manchester, Norwich, and Groton, between 25 and 30% of students are opting out for remote instruction. And in Connecticut, smaller towns like Litchfield, Willington, Pomfret, only about 10% of the students are opting out for full remote instruction. These are trends in Connecticut that are actually, that they mirror the trends across the nation. Recently, the Center on Reinventing Public Education, a think tank in Washington, it sampled 477 school districts in a statistical representation of all the districts across the US. Their key findings include students in the highest poverty districts are the most likely to start the year in remote learning. Students in rural communities are far more likely to choose for full in-person instruction. Excuse me. Almost half of the nation's school districts will be returning to full in-person instruction. So those are some interesting figures. You know, these are anxious times for Connecticut parents, not to mention the pandemic. For many parents, the loss of jobs, derailment of careers, loss of income, the resulting difficulties in putting food on the table and maintaining a home. Isn't there a comet that's going to hit the earth the day before Election Day? This is a stressful time for parents. And parents are experiencing and about to experience more things that we haven't faced before, and so will our children. And there is no track record of how these things will turn out. Not much of a record, no assurance of a positive outcome. And well, maybe you'll get a hopeful feeling at best. It's like driving a car. But the windshield, it's blacked out. And all you can use for guidance is your rear view mirror. You know, there's always the unexpected and the risk of disaster. That's what parents are facing now, and students, and this is a troubling time. On the next edition of Answers, it will be October 6th. That's because we are about to go on a monthly schedule. Write it down in your calendars and date books. The first Tuesday of every month will be the time for the Answers webinar. So that means our next edition will be on October 6th. There will be an exception. Election Day is the first Tuesday in November. I think people will be thinking of other things on Election Day, so we're going to go the day before Election Day, but after that and for the foreseeable future, we will be doing Tuesdays, 6 o'clock, the first Tuesday of the month. And now, Cindy Curtis with a point of information. Cindy premiered on this webinar in our last edition, and now she is back. Please help me welcome Cindy Curtis.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to be back. This evening on Point of Information, in this section, what I'd like to talk about is requesting a PPT meeting. What we're going to talk about is when and why you should be requesting a PPT meeting, how to request it, and the different types of PPT meetings that there are. So the first is when to request a PPT meeting. When your child's struggling, they're unable to keep up with their peers, either academically, socially, or due to behaviors, that's a signal that you should be requesting a PPT meeting. When you have concerns that need remediation for your child who is receiving special education, or you believe needs to be evaluated for special education, requesting a PPT meeting is appropriate. When your child is not making appropriate progress or the expected progress. So sometimes when we're working with the school, we'll put in a special program. The expectation is we're looking for positive or appropriate progress within 2 weeks. If it's not happening, request another PPT meeting, or the school should, so that you can figure out how to adapt and how to modify that. Again, when you want to request or discuss a program change, or when you or your child have a safety issue with your child being at school, that's a very appropriate reason to call a PPT. A PPT meeting can be called at any time, and candidly, there is confusion around this at times, but if you make a request for a PPT meeting, no, you don't have to wait for an annual review. No, you don't have to wait until, 4 months from now. A PPT meeting can be called anytime, and that's important for you to know. There's no predefined number of PPT meetings that can be held during the year. So sometimes if everything is going smoothly, you may be doing just annual reviews. If there's a problem where your child's struggling and it's taking a while for the team to figure out what the best approach is, you may be doing several PPTs during the year. You should always make your request for the meeting in writing, and once again, email is fine to use. When you put your request in writing, and we'll look at a quick sample in a minute, what you should add is just a brief statement, no more than 1 or 2 sentences, on why you're requesting the PPT meeting. It's important to know that school districts are required to schedule the meeting that you've asked for, but they're required to do it within a reasonable time frame. So what you may think is reasonable and the school may not be in sync. So one of the things that you can do is when you put your request in for the PPT meeting, ask if at all possible it can be scheduled in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The other thing I would suggest is if you don't hear back from the school about scheduling the meeting that you've asked for, reach out to the school and just ask for an update. And it's also a nice way to make a reminder that you're still there and waiting for the meeting. And usually that'll take care of it. There are several different types of PPT meetings. The first one we're going to look at is the pre-referral. So this can be called either by you as a parent or school staff. And it's typically called because a child or your child continues not to make the progress that they should be making, but they're not keeping pace with their peers. And either you or the school suspect that there may be an underlying cause of a disability. Typically, but not always, support interventions are in place for your child and have been ongoing. So typically, if you reach this point, it's because those supports aren't enough for your child. A pre-referral PPT meeting will determine if a disability is in fact suspected by the team, and if it is, then a series of specialized tests will be identified and completed. The school district, once this happens, has 45 days to complete the comprehensive testing and review the results with all team members, including you as a parent. This is a sample request, which honestly, with slight modifications, you can use for all of the different PPT meetings. It's just your name, the school, very simple, you're writing to request. In this case, it's an assessment, your child's name, grade, a brief description of why you're asking for it. And then it's up to you. You can put in, I'd like to see this meeting in X period of time. But basically the information is here is all that you need to request the meeting. Another type of PPT meeting that you or the school staff can call is either an unscheduled or what I call ad hoc PPT meeting. Again, this can be called at any time, and the reasons that you would do it is, again, your child's not making the expected progress in a particular area or particular subject. Your child is struggling with absenteeism, falling behind in work, some behaviors that are distracting from their education, mental health concerns such as anxiety. Again, you and the other team, members of the team, will review the concerns that are brought to the table and determine the best approach and define the corrective actions. Your child's IEP may or may not at this point be changed and updated, which is fine, as long as you're comfortable with the steps that will be taken for correction. Another type of PPT meeting is the emergency PPT. Again, you or school personnel can call this meeting. Typically, due to the nature of why it's being called, it usually occurs, the meeting occurs within 24 to 48 hours, although there is no specific timeline legally. Often when an emergency PPT meeting is called, it's often due to child safety. It may be due to significant reoccurrence of behaviors. Basically, it's got to be a major issue impacting your child's ability to access their education. Some examples from a safety perspective include a young child, if they're leaving their classroom unsupervised, attempting to leave the school building, school grounds, school refusal. So it really is, from a safety perspective, if a child's of an age that should be supervised, for some reason doesn't have the ability to stay where they need to and they're roaming around, that's a safety issue for your child. You and the other members of the team review the Thank you, Kevin. It's good to be back. This evening on Point of Information, in this section, what I'd like to talk about is requesting a PPT meeting. What we're going to talk about is when and why you should be requesting a PPT meeting, how to request it, and the different types of PPT meetings that there are. So the first is when to request a PPT meeting. When your child's struggling, they're unable to keep up with their peers, either academically, socially, or due to behaviors, that's a signal that you should be requesting a PPT meeting. When you have concerns that need remediation for your child who is receiving special education, or you believe needs to be evaluated for special education, requesting a PPT meeting is appropriate. When your child is not making appropriate progress or the expected progress. So sometimes when we're working with the school, we'll put in a special program. The expectation is you're looking for positive or appropriate progress within 2 weeks. If it's not happening, request another PPT meeting, or the school should, so that you can figure out how to adapt and how to modify that. Again, when you want to request or discuss a program change, or when you or your child have a safety issue with your child being at school, that's a very appropriate reason to call a PPT. A PPT meeting can be called at any time, and candidly, there is confusion around this at times, but if you make a request for a PPT meeting, no, you don't have to wait for an annual review. No, you don't have to wait until, 4 months from now. A PPT meeting can be called anytime, and that's important for you to know. There's no predefined number of PPT meetings that can be held during the year. So sometimes if everything is going smoothly, you may be doing just annual reviews. If there's a problem where your child's struggling and it's taking a while for the team to figure out what the best approach is, you may be doing several PPTs during the year. You should always make your request for the meeting in writing, and once again, email is fine to use. When you put your request in writing, and we'll look at a quick sample in a minute, what you should add is just a brief statement, no more than 1 or 2 sentences, on why you're requesting the PPT meeting. It's important to know that school districts are required to schedule the meeting that you've asked for, but they're required to do it within a reasonable time frame. So what you may think is reasonable and the school may not be in sync. So one of the things that you can do is when you put your request in for the PPT meeting, ask if at all possible it can be scheduled in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The other thing I would suggest is if you don't hear back from the school about scheduling the meeting that you've asked for, reach out to the school and just ask for an update. And it's also a nice way to make a reminder that you're still there and waiting for the meeting. And usually that'll take care of it. There are several different types of PPT meetings. The first one we're going to look at is the pre-referral. So this can be called either by you as a parent or school staff. And it's typically called because a child or your child continues not to make the progress that they should be making, but they're not keeping pace with their peers. And either you or the school suspect that there may be an underlying cause of a disability. Typically, but not always, support interventions are in place for your child and have been ongoing. So typically, if you reach this point, it's because those supports aren't enough for your child. A pre-referral PPT meeting will determine if a disability is in fact suspected by the team. And if it is, then a series of specialized tests will be identified and completed. The school district, once this happens, has 45 days to complete the comprehensive testing and review the results with all team members, including you as a parent. This is a sample request, which honestly, with slight modifications, you can use for all of the different PPT meetings. It's just your name, the school, very simple, you're writing to request. In this case, it's an assessment, your child's name, grade, a brief description of why you're asking for it. And then it's up to you. You can put in, I'd like to see this meeting in X period of time. But basically the information is here is all that you need to request the meeting. Another type of PPT meeting that you or the school staff can call is either an unscheduled or what I call ad hoc PPT meeting. Again, this can be called at any time, and the reasons that you would do it is, again, your child's not making the expected progress in a particular area or particular subject. Your child is struggling with absenteeism, falling behind in work, some behaviors that are distracting from their education, mental health concerns such as anxiety. Again, you and the other team, members of the team, will review the concerns that are brought to the table and determine the best approach and define the corrective actions. Your child's IEP may or may not at this point be changed and updated, which is fine, as long as you're comfortable with the steps that will be taken for correction. Another type of PPT meeting is the emergency PPT. Again, you or school personnel can call this meeting. Typically, due to the nature of why it's being called, it usually occurs, the meeting occurs within 24 to 48 hours, although there is no specific timeline legally. Often when an emergency PPT meeting is called, it's often due to child safety. It may be due to significant reoccurrence of behaviors. Basically, it's got to be a major issue impacting your child's ability to access their education. Some examples from a safety perspective include a young child, if they're leaving their classroom unsupervised, attempting to leave the school building, school grounds, school refusal. So it really is, from a safety perspective, if a child's of an age that should be supervised, for some reason doesn't have the ability to stay where they need to and they're roaming around, that's a safety issue for your child. You and the other members of the team review the concerns again and determine the best approach. And once again, the IEP, although often will be updated with an emergency PPT meeting, does not have to be. A manifestation PPT meeting. This legally the school should be requesting and scheduling, but it's not always the case. So let's walk through this one. A child with a disability engages in a behavior or breaks a code of conduct, and the school is proposing a change in their programming, suspending the child. It needs to be for more than 10 days. Before that can start, a PPT team must conduct what's called a manifest determination. In this meeting, basically, what the team is reviewing and determining is, was the behavior exhibited by the student a result of the child's disability? The answer to that question then dictates different paths, whether the suspension goes forward or an IEP is modified. But this really is a key meeting. If a school district does not schedule this meeting, parents should. Often parents will hear that, well, it's not really that important. It is important, and if they're not doing it, you should reach out. And this last is some acronyms that were used in the presentation. So I hope that this was very helpful for people. I think the most important thing to take away is that you do have a right at any time to request a PPT meeting. Obviously, make sure that there is a need to do this. Typically, before a PPT meeting is called, you've already discussed your concerns or issues with teacher, special ed, or whoever is appropriate. But if you believe a meeting should be called, it is absolutely within your right to do it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was wondering, let's say I am the parent of a special education student. I have a ton of questions about my child's program, their IEP, how it's going to be implemented. Is this a good time for me to ask for a PPT meeting?
You bet. So as Kevin, as you had said earlier, these are pretty extraordinary times. So what I would say to parents is, if you don't feel that your child's program is solid and in place, and you understand what's going on, then you should be calling a PPT meeting. If you have specific questions, much smaller in nature, then you can contact the teacher or the special ed, whoever's appropriate. And if you feel that the program is in place, you understand it, you feel comfortable with it, then at this time, basically similar to in the presentation, I don't think there's a need. If you're questioning and if you're uncertain, request a PPT meeting, talk to the team about your concerns.
Okay, fair enough. And I think this has been said before on this webinar, it's going to be a long time for we as parents actually physically go to a school for an in-person PPT meeting. I'd like to think that day will come.
Hopefully it will. In the meantime, it's amazing what we've been able to do with Zoom. So, but hopefully sooner versus later, we'll be doing in-person meetings again.
Thank you, Cindy. And to our participants, I apologize for the technical difficulties during Cindy's segment. You did end up hearing what she had to say more than one time, some of it. But what Cindy had to say is certainly worth listening to and re-listening to. So thank you, Cindy. We are going to move on now. And now it's time for an interview with my guest, Dr. Adrienne Smaller. She's on the faculty of the Yale Child Study Center at the Yale School of Medicine. She has a private psychology practice in Madison, and her specialty is the psychological evaluation of children with learning disorders and developmental disabilities. She's a longtime consultant for public schools. She also performs school evaluations, and she's a great advocate for our kids. Dr. Smaller, welcome to Answers.
Thank you, Kevin.
And let me get rid of this PowerPoint.
Okay.
And there we are.
Okay.
So and I know that you had a PowerPoint you wanted to share, but first let me thank you for appearing on Answers. And this is your return engagement. You were nice enough to appear way back in April, which seems like 100 years ago at this point.
It does. I can't believe that it was so long ago and that we're still struggling with so many of the same issues. So.
Yeah, much has happened.
So with that, let's see if I can share the screen here and tell me if this is working. How's that? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. So Kevin asked me to talk about children's mental health in the time of COVID and specifically in the return to school. So if we take a look at this, and I think, Kevin, you highlighted so many of our concerns. It certainly has been a time of change and uncertainty. Everything that was familiar and predictable about our lives and our children's lives has temporarily changed. There have been losses, uncertainties, and many things to adjust to, which has created many different feelings. And remember, I'm in the business of feelings. Feelings are never wrong or right, they just are. We cannot minimize the stress that we've all gone through and will continue to for the future, into the future, because that's such an unknown. And certainly that slide, Kevin, that you showed was very illustrative of what we're concerned about. In the last 6 months, sort of looking back, which is the only reference point we have, we've experienced higher levels of parental stress, disrupted family routines, the passing of a loved one, sometimes from the virus, financial insecurity due to parental loss or job loss or furlough, prolonged periods of not being able to see some family members, And then the loss of celebration of our life cycle milestones. Birthdays had to be altered, weddings, graduations, funerals, birth of children, and not to mention all the holidays that we have gone through in the last 6 months. So we have really had to alter our lives in so many different areas. So when we look at our children, I wish I could have better news, and particularly now in the beginning of school, the kids are not all right. There's been little hard research on how this pandemic is affecting children's mental health because of the virus being so fast moving, and that our studies take time to employ. There are some larger studies that are being done at the Yale Child Study Center, some through APA, and certainly through the National Center for Children with mental health disorders. However, we do know that the results of quarantine and its isolation can exacerbate any pre-existing mental health condition, and most importantly, depression, anxiety, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The impact of a child's sense of safety depends on the extent to which their family is affected in this pandemic. Children worry about their own health, about their parents' health, and in this time, about their grandparents' health. Children who were struggling before COVID-19 are at higher risk now. The age of the child is a factor. When younger children may not experience much difference in their life, the loss of their child care center, caregivers, play dates, playgrounds is significant. Or having a parent or both parents working from home. Having the parents there but unavailable to them is certainly a harsh reality. Younger children are adept at picking up on stress and tension in the home and can become more needy with disruption of sleep, eating, or toileting. For school-age children and teens, being with friends is everything. And the school provided a place for this to happen. It's where they spent the majority of their time. For adolescents and college-age teens, the isolation and desire to be with friends, coupled with their sense of omnipotence, that is, that they're young and strong and immune to the virus, that has had a very strong negative impact in places that have opened too soon. And we're now sort of seeing some of the statistical issues in terms of colleges. So this year, parents have had no good choice this school year. Parents have been forced to figure out how to care for and educate their children in a pandemic. They're blaming one another, they're blaming school boards. They have really been left to figure this out with very little support. And we don't have a government leadership that's trying to coordinate the issue across the nation. So what are the concerns? Parents have to consider children's learning differences, children's health issues, parents' work schedules, and high-risk family members. If parents send their children to schools that reopen, are they endangering them and their teachers? If they keep them home, are they pulling support from schools and depriving children in their time of need? If they hire someone to help with remote learning, are they widening the achievement gaps and contributing to inequality, or increasing the risk of exposure by having someone in their home? So how to handle the anxiety over back to school decisions. And parents experience a combination of dread, fear, panic, and sheer exhaustion, deciding what to do and what to do with uncomfortable feelings that could arise after the decision. For many parents, the decision has been made at this point, although nothing is written in stone, but there's no one right answer. And we need to focus on evaluating and mitigating the risks and assessing benefits and then feel good about the process, or at least at having some sense of making this decision. Once the parents have a plan, they're faced with the task of coping with the onslaught of feelings like worry. Parents never stop worrying, guilt, fear, and then that uncertainty. Parents are the key to children's mental health. Parents need to accept the uncertainty, which is part of healthy coping. There are no guarantees. We need to distinguish between productive and unproductive worries. Spending time considering how you will navigate the logistics of blended learning is productive. But ruminating about the social distancing precautions of each family in your child's school is taking a less productive approach because you do not have control there. So I recommend stop fighting with your feelings. Being a parent during a pandemic is to be worried and uncomfortable. You can try using positive self-talk, such as, I'm making the best choice for my family with the information that I have, or this decision works for us and our level of risk tolerance. Preparing your child to return to school. I'm sure that the conversation has started, but if not, start talking. Explore their worries about returning to school, what they fear, what is confusing, what is on their minds can be minor, a minor concern to a parent, but a big one to them, such as where they sit in class, the use of the bathroom, or as one little boy told me this week, catching the virus bug, where his mother reported that he was very frightened of bugs outside because he felt that bugs were carrying the virus. So we have to be careful about how we use vocabulary in front of our children, particularly our kids who are more concrete thinkers. You can make use of feeling charts, which are available on the internet. Have them talk about things that they enjoy about going back to school. You can have them make a drawing about their worries, write about their concerns, or answer unfinished sentences such as, I worry about, and giving them the beginning of the sentence and helping them to fill in the blanks. You can establish a school sleep routine prior to the start of school and talk about the daily routine of their school schedule. Review it, as some routines for hybrid learning are different every day. Making a visual schedule and reviewing it on a daily basis will help to alleviate some of the anxiety. Coping strategies, such as modeling coping strategies that you use in your daily life when you're feeling stressed, unless of course it's, going to a glass of wine in the evening. Perhaps we could sort of translate that into your child's favorite lemonade, or reconnecting with friends before returning to school, doing regular exercise, using breathing techniques, and share some of your own worries and ways that you're managing them. And you can make yourself available as much as possible to create a space for talking in different ways, for talking in the car, going through the drive-thru at McDonald's, while on a walk, while baking or cooking together. For adolescents, I think it's important to normalize the anxiety because it makes sense right now. Help them to channel their discomfort into useful action, such as learning about and following health guidelines in school, looking at the CDC website for those facts, those of our adolescents who are really fact-based. Keep them talking about what they think it will be like this school year, and just keep them talking. Offer a perspective, help them to keep anxiety levels that are appropriate. Don't overestimate the dangers or underestimate their ability to protect themselves. And then shift the spotlight, that schools are maintaining safety habits to protect others, that we use these safety habits to ease the strain on medical systems, to protect others. Perhaps you could suggest they're volunteering, doing something that's productive and other than caring about themselves at this point in time, donating to a local food bank or to Goodwill. And then you want to encourage distractions, to limit the news and then the exposure to rumors on social media. Keep open communication about where and who they are socializing and express your concerns about that. So look at the positives. For some children, school was their refuge. It was structured and predictable. Talk about the things that the child is looking forward to seeing their friends, to seeing a favorite teacher, and to learning new skills. Looking forward to their favorite shop or cafe opening for an after-school celebration. Wearing new clothes, choosing a mask with their favorite superhero. Being in the band, being in the high school for the first time, and feeling like their lives have started again after a very long pause. For our more vulnerable children, there is an increase in anxiety levels for children who were already anxious in their temperament, and children who had not experienced anxiety have developed anxious behaviors. Some parents report to me that there are germ fears, fears of other people, issues with sleep and eating, hand washing issues, and challenging behaviors such as meltdowns, getting stuck on something, and difficulty letting go of screen activities. Children with sensory issues are having difficulty with masking. Many schools have addressed the social and emotional learning in their reopening plan as they anticipate an increase of emotional issues due to the pandemic. So learn more about your school and what they are providing if your child is struggling. If you worry that your child may need more guidance, reach out to your pediatrician or mental health practitioner, as telehealth is more available than ever today. For many children, school was not a safe place or a comfortable place, and they have done better at home. For these children, the transition back to school should be closely monitored for low moments, for moodiness, depression, and anxiety. There are concerns that returning to school could bring a new wave of bullying, particularly around pandemic-related issues, such as masking or pandemic weight gain, or ethnic slurs regarding the China virus. Maintain close communication with teachers and their support staff for monitoring your child's response. Things to remember. All children have regressed over the last 6 months in their time at home. Children have varying levels of coping skills and resilience with those experiences. Children may not feel able to jump right into learning, so finding time to allow them to get ready to learn, to ease into the schedule, and to really decrease the demands at home would be helpful. The challenges facing parents may feel overwhelming, but other parents, teachers, and neighbors around the world are facing the very same issues. These are some resources that I found to be helpful. CASEL is a group that focuses on social and emotional learning, and they have a wonderful section on coping with the COVID-19. The feeling charts that I recommended are on Latitude. They're free and can be downloaded. The Mental Health Foundation of the UK also has a wonderful section on helping children cope through this difficult time, as does the Child Mind Institute out of New York City. And the American Psychological Association has a wonderful book that is free and can be downloaded called Unstuck. And the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence also gives regular weekly updates on what we should be concerned about in dealing with our children.
Adrienne, thank you so much for sharing that wisdom. I have to tell you, a couple of points you made really resonated with me, especially the idea that the kids are not all right, because I hear from parents all the time, And that's what they're telling me. Their kids are not all right, and very often the parents aren't either.
Right.
I know younger children, I agree they're a little less susceptible, but I've got two grandkids. They are ages 4 and 7. One of them is entering school for the first time in preschool. Both of them, they're anxious because they don't know what to expect. My second grader, he's got an advantage because he's already spent first grade at that school. But I just wonder what it's going to be like for my preschool granddaughter, who will be learning to cope with the structure of going to school, in addition to the additional structures and precautions that are taking place. It just makes me wonder what's going to happen and just how much more anxious they're going to become.
That's right. Just in terms, I've done some limited testing in person in my office, as well as virtual assessments, and the masking and the plexiglass, and they're pretty good with, temperature taking and hand sanitizer, because I think wherever they've gone in the last 6 months, they've had to do some of that, whether it's a pediatrician's office or dentist or that kind of thing. So I find that doesn't sort of rattle them as much, although by the end of, sort of a half an hour, the mask is like this and the nose is out, and, it takes, and for those of us who wear masks just, throughout the day, or even going to the market, going outside, it's just uncomfortable. And for kids who are little kids with sensory issues, it is a big deal, and it is going to be an adjustment. But I'm trusting that sort of peer pressure, and everybody's doing this, and sort of getting more into the swing of things. Hopefully it will become more normalized, and that some of that anxiety will begin to dissipate a bit.
Sure. Well, on the subject of normalizing, one thing that you mentioned about normalizing anxiety, that's something that we as adults can do by just admitting, yeah, this is an anxious time. We're supposed to be a little bit uptight, and making yourself a role model when discussing this with your children. That it's okay to be a bit uptight. That's a natural reaction, and also assuring them that, the virus is going to be here for a while, but not your entire life.
Right, that's right. I just heard just prior to us going on about Connecticut being extended to February 2021, the emergency, statutes. So that was really sort of took me by surprise. And so we are going to be in this for a while.
Yes. Well, those coping mechanisms are important, and we're going to hear about that from our next guest, Brenda, a parent who lives in Northeast Connecticut.
Hi, and welcome to PATH, Parent to Parent Family Voices of Connecticut. My name is Audra Talbot, and I have the honor of having Brenda with us tonight. And Brenda is an educator and also a parent. So I think this is going to be a great interview tonight. And so, Brenda, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for asking me to be a part of it. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, me too. So I'd like to ask you, what is your experience as an educator? Let's start there.
I have been a special educator for 32 years. I've been in special education my entire life. I am also a parent of 2 children. I have a daughter who's 28, and she is also an educator. And I have a son who's 22, and he has some significant complex needs that require a lot of intuitive thinking in order to get him through his day and continue his education. So I've always, through the 22 years of his life, been working with every team to think creatively and think outside the box in how he can best be educated. I am also an executive board member for the Council on Developmental Disabilities. I've been 6 years on that board. I'm also a graduate of the LEND program, the Yukon LEND program, which is Leadership in Education Neurodevelopmental Disabilities. I have also been involved in SEPTOs for many, many years. I've run a SEPTO. The name of it was Success SEPTO, and it was in Willington, Connecticut. So we would bring in lots and lots of professionals and work with families. I continue to be a strong family advocate, and I'm quite connected to a lot of different families and how to get supports throughout the state, and really every family's individual needs and their educational needs, as well as using some of my own background and challenges with navigating with my own son's needs to help others.
That's quite a history, Brenda. And it's funny because it feels like it mirrors a lot of things that I am part of and how I started out as a parent. I also have 2 kids. So yeah, just starting there. I think we're kind of, my life mirrors yours. So if you wouldn't mind, would you share as much as you want to about your son's needs? And then if you don't mind, maybe going into how that, what his successes are.
Sure. So I have a son with cerebral palsy. He is very, very smart, fairly complicated physical needs, but from very early on, we were able to find his access method to communicate, and it was his eyes. So about 21 years ago, we were involved with Boston College in the first Eagle Eyes program, where they used computers to see that his intellectual ability is all there. So we have traveled down this road, living in a small rural community, of trying to get educators and therapists and lots and lots of service providers all on board to think outside the box. So some of our struggles have been, many times people see a wheelchair and they automatically think that the person in the wheelchair is cognitively impaired as well. And so they treat him, he is nonverbal, so they treat him as somebody with less capabilities, intellectual capabilities, and his frustration has been pretty high. We have struggled through the medical field to try to step away and do more of a holistic approach. So he's done a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, oral motor therapy. When he was younger, we worked a tremendous amount on feeding to get a G-tube removed, which has been, he is now 22. He is at a community college. He is taking classes. The online part is going very well. We have advanced through technology through the years, and we are now on the latest. It's called an I-16. It's a Toby. And Sean's going to numerous conferences around the country. He uses his computer pretty proficiently. He is able to Zoom his therapist, do his classes, navigate emails, FaceTime, YouTube, all of that, all with his eyes, using a pretty high device. So he's been teaching most of us, but trying to get people on board has been a little bit of a bumpy road. We're not sure where the future is going, but he's extremely motivated to learn, very social, very, very happy. And he's become a really strong advocate for himself, partially through CASA that he was involved with when he was a little bit younger, and trying to just interview and continuously hire his own staff. Now that he's an adult, he has to ask them some pretty challenging questions and be able to tell us if he thinks that that person might work or might not. So his dream is to be living out independently someday, and we hope to help him get to that dream and, and work. We're not exactly sure what that's going to look like, but we're very, very think outside the box type of people. So Hope I answered that question okay.
You did, and you gave me so many more questions to ask from what you just said. So thank you so much for sharing so openly. I really do appreciate that. But he sounds like an amazing young man. The load that we have as parents to children with these exceptional needs, and what we do every day. It's just, you can hear my guy.
Okay. It's totally fine.
It's real life. This is real life. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm surprised he hasn't, dive bombed me yet. That's coming, sure. But yeah. So there's another question I wanted to ask about was CASA.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I know that's through PATH, but could you tell us a little bit about CASA and how your son was involved in CASA?
Sure. CASA is an amazing organization. Kids as self-advocates that would meet in Farmington on Saturdays. And I think the youngest was 16 or 17. And at the time, I think the oldest at the room was 26. And they, just young people getting together and wanting to listen to one another, to make a difference, to, in some cases, they did fundraising, they plan social activities, they talk about how to advise each other and how even getting jobs, the challenges that they would run into in schools and in the community, and how, just multiple ways to support each other in learning strategies to advocate for each other. My son would go there with a personal care assistant. So he didn't want me there because it was just teenagers and, young adults, and parents were not necessarily welcome there because they want the freedom to say. And my son would bring his device. He has a device that he uses with his eyes, and he would, participate in that and listen and just absorb what the peers are saying, their challenges are. And it's a place where you can feel safe, and you feel that camaraderie, and you can, everyone feels equal. Nobody judges you. It's a judge-free zone. And it's helping them all to grow into this world as they are leaving the school system and those supports, and they're entering into the adult world. What's that going to look like? And
so Brenda, if you have any wisdom that you can impart on our families, I would love to hear it.
okay.
I think it's really important because of your situation and your knowledge over the years of what you've learned. I think it would be really helpful to our families out there if you could maybe share some words of wisdom. Feel free, please.
Thank you. I try to find something in the course of the day to laugh or joke about. It seems there's so much pressure on families every day. And as I mentioned to you, we try to do one small prank. It can be a silly prank every day to make someone laugh, someone smile, to be silly. It could be something as simple as texting a joke to a friend, sending a funny meme to somebody, putting a bug in the refrigerator, a fake bug, or, accidentally not putting sugar instead of salt in somebody's tea, things like that. Little tiny pranks or something to smile at, looking at a sunset or listening to a song that you haven't heard in a long time. Many of us don't have the time to do that self-care and thinking of ourselves. We might not. I had a girlfriend say she was going to paint one toenail a day until she got all 10 of her toenails painted, and that was her one happy moment of the day. Just when we think about the pandemic and we think that all that we're going through is to really stay connected to other families, and whether it's your biological families or your neighbors that have become your families, or your teachers, the teachers that are educating your children, stay connected, ask for help, and it's okay to cry. It's okay to say, I can't do this anymore. And it's okay sometime to just, take that breath. Take that breath. I can time myself out sometimes by stepping behind the door. I don't leave. I just go behind the door just for 5 minutes, not even, and just breathe and just do nothing but breathe. I I'd like to think of this pandemic and think of the positive things. And what I've seen across the board with families is that as we all struggle with technology, we're getting better and better as the days go on. At least things are starting to become a little bit more familiar with, maybe we don't know all the platforms, but we learn a platform and we use it for a while and then we feel a little comfortable. And, you know, our frustrations do go down the more we practice, and we're being forced to use more and more technology every day. I feel like we all have a greater appreciation for the teachers that have worked so hard for our children. Now that our children are home, we're getting to know our kids more, families are coming together, but just to see the wealth of knowledge that goes into working with students and with kids and being there for them, to support them emotionally, physically, and never giving up. And when my son gets frustrated, I say, you know what? We have to take a deep breath and we have to try something new. Let's go to plan B. Let's go to plan C and teach them to be flexible. It's a lot easier said than done, because in the real world, we don't get breaks. We don't get breaks, but be good to yourself. Have a cup of tea, maybe a glass of wine, something at the end of the day, even, you know, a warm bath, or take a shower for an extra 5 minutes, if that's all the time you have. But stay connected, you know, call people, ask for help, stay connected is so critical. That's where I'm coming from, just being there for other families. And when I'm down and out, I call other families and they say, you can do this. So I hope I've been helpful, and I hope to continue to help as many people as I can. And I don't want to see us go backwards in special ed either. I want us to see our children living successful lives in the communities, doing whatever they want to do, being a part of our world, and being equal and having equal access to everything. We need equal access for everybody, whether you have a disability or not, no matter what. We need to have more balance, more social equity for sure. So I hope I've been helpful. So
well, thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge, because I actually learned a couple of things from you today. So I'm actually going to buy those bugs. And
really funny.
Maybe I'll send one to you in the mail.
They're funny. One of my son's therapists said that she started it now in her house, and she put them in their refrigerator in the sugar bowl, and her kids, they love it. It's just that one teeny tiny fun thing during the day.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't cost much at all, and it's just adding that smile, that fun, something fun in the day.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And this is Audra Talbot for PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you, Brenda, very much. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you so much for asking me. Take care.
And that was Audra's interview with Brenda. Audra, if you're still with us, could you come on, please, so we can talk?
Hi, Kevin. How are you tonight? Good,
thanks. So I enjoyed your interview with Brenda. She's wonderful, isn't she?
She is wonderful, and I think she's one of those types of people that she uses her knowledge, and it helps her to help others. It's just so evident to me after speaking with her just a brief amount of time. So she's a wonderful person, for sure. She's got her hands full, but she's a wonderful person, and she knows how to do it well.
Yes, she does. And it's interesting that her son, Sean, was involved in CASA, Kids as Self-Advocates. This program is from PATH, the nonprofit that brings this webinar to the public. And if you have a young person at home who could sharpen their leadership skills and perhaps needs to be a bit more independent, you should consider CASA, CT CASA. Go to the PATH website, pathct.org, and you'll see information about CT CASA. And now that the meetings are all online, there isn't the chore of having to drive to Farmington. They meet on Saturday. I'm not sure when the next meeting is, but they meet on monthly. They elect their own leaders. They plan their own projects. Us parents, we kind of take a back seat to them. And well, as our kids grow up and come into their own, that's pretty much what should happen.
Yeah. What happens at casa stays at casa. No parents allowed. Yeah.
Sure. Dr. Smaller, Cindy, if you could come back, please. Okay, I just wanted to thank all of you for your contributions to the webinar today, and we will see you, I hope, on October 6th, the first Tuesday in October, 6 p.m. for the next edition of Answers. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.